Rock and roll, man. And so, a new venture continues, with a hope that I can help fellow creatives navigate the sometimes choppy and uncertain waters of the tweet machine. My name is Lee Hall, and I'm an indie author from the UK. I'd like to thank you for joining me, and also welcome you to this space for what is Twitter Coaching Sessions number 3. For this session, I'm going to talk about how to sell books on Twitter, or at least how I sell books on Twitter, with a view of hopefully helping you do the same. My sole focus with these coaching sessions is to make sure you come away with something useful. I'm going to put in the utmost effort to make sure of that. Those first 2 sessions, if you did listen to them, thank you for the support, thank you for listening to them. They were just really at a glance. They were more broader subjects. This sort of stuff from now on will probably be more detailed, or at least contain something that really could properly help you. So the rest of this exclusive series will contain some of my best methods for Twitter success. Well, that's the hope anyway. Let us dive in to selling books on Twitter. First of all, you probably should know that selling books takes time, and it takes presence, and it's important to remember Rome was not built in a day. But there is hope for all authors, because if you can sell one book on social media, then eventually you can get 100 sales, or 100 patrons, or a number that makes you happy. And a lot of this is in the eye of the beholder. My guidebook, Consistent Creative Content, kind of hammers that home, that this is in the eye of the beholder, and success is something that happens over time. And sometimes it's good to just look around, take a look around, and realize, actually, things are pretty good, or things are way better than they were. And it's celebrating the small wins. So, I'm going to talk you through how I sell books regularly. Now, long term, I tend to focus more on being present on Twitter, and that presence will eventually entice others towards my work. So much like session 1, which talked in detail about the profile, your books should be easily findable from there, and it should be easily understood by a potential reader that you write books. Of course, this goes into the bio, and what you have in your banner at the top of your profile, what you have as a pinned tweet, maybe with some cover art or a book trailer with a link attached. All of that stuff, that basic stuff, will give you a greater chance at selling something by making it easy accessible for a potential reader. And then there's what we covered in session 2, if you did tune in, tweeting and tweeting regularly. The concepts of both previous sessions will work towards you selling books, and tweeting regularly will get you noticed, and it will keep you visible to not just your current following, but newer eyes as well, and people that could potentially follow you. And that's very important. You have to stay afloat in those choppy waters of the tweet machine. So if you do stay visible, people will eventually become interested in you, and they'll become interested in you for what you tweet about. And that visibility, I've said it enough times now, is the key to selling. You have to stay visible. And for me, that basically means being present enough on Twitter where people notice you to make a connection and are enticed to buy my work. As authors, our biggest challenge is letting the world know we exist. And so Twitter is great for that. It's great for shouting into the void. Now, it might feel like you're shouting into an empty void, but sometimes that's a nice thing. That's okay. That's all right. You go and let off some steam. Old man yells at a cloud. Well, good for him. At least he's expressing his anger in some way with not actually really harming anyone apart from the clouds. But that void that you do feel like you're shouting into does eventually answer back. So being present for visibility is both a long-term and a short-term thing, and the selling side of stuff gets easier with the more books you have published. So for those of perhaps just 1 or 2 published, let this be the motivator to release more work over time. It does get easier the more choice you have on your shelf. Readers like to have some choice from an author they are reading from. That goes all the way back to one of my origin stories when I picked up a Michael Crichton book that I found whilst being an airline cleaner when I was about 16 years old, my first job. And it was Timeline by Michael Crichton, a great sci-fi time travel story. And I read it very quickly, cover to cover, and as soon as I'd finished reading it, I was enticed to find out whether or not Michael Crichton had any more books. Now, of course, I knew him from Jurassic Park and Westworld and all that, but if a reader has a good experience of one of your books, they will normally be enticed to see if you have any more, and that really helps with selling, is having more books. So just let that be a motivator for you. But those of just a couple of books, even one book, you can still sell books regularly on social media, because on social media, anything is possible. So keep tweeting. And those that do keep tweeting will eventually find rewards. So a practical method to increase that visibility of yours would be to tweet regularly till perhaps the evening, and then post about your books on that evening. So after a day of tweeting, you kind of built your presence up, you've kept the engagement up, and now it's time to kind of strike whilst the iron is hot, and strike whilst you can, whilst you've got the engagement up. So evening is great because more people are online normally, and if you have spent the day tweeting regularly about various subjects, this should have pushed your profile towards more visibility. A recent example of that for me, I try to do all these weird and wonderful things with my tweets now to see how much engagement I can possibly get with the fewest words possible. It's a bit of a challenge I have set myself. And so I put out a short question, very relevant question to authors and writers and readers, and it pushed up my engagement. Got a lot of notifications. It got to the point where I'm going to have to probably mute notifications now because this is becoming overwhelming. There is only one of me. I don't have a social media team or anything like that. I'm very much a fella with his phone. So it sometimes does get a bit overwhelming. And about an hour after things had decided to calm down, I put out another tweet showing a cover of my guidebook, Consistent Creative Content, and a couple of quotes from recent reviews. They work together quite well in a tweet. And then some hours later, I noticed a sale appear on my Amazon sales dashboard. So if you can time this two-part method well, then you'll increase your chances of selling through your visibility and engagement going up. So to unpack that in the most basic of ways is to simply increase your engagement through tweeting about perhaps non-sales subjects, just random fun, and then plugging your work after it in moderation. Now, remember to keep it conversational because conversation turns that tweet machine. Conversation is the key to success. And a lot of things are the key to success. I say that a lot, but it's true. Get that engagement up and you will eventually be way more visible to a lot more tweeters. Now, a useful tool to check on your engagement level is found on the browser version of Twitter. So via the analytics section and then under the tweets tab at the very top of the page, you will then be taken to the tweet activity page. I spend a lot of time on this page. And on the right-hand side is a bunch of graphics. Now, the top one is a graphic that measures engagement rate. Now, this graph is live. It moves as your engagement goes up and down, and it changes constantly. I tend to look at this page quite often and that particular graphic to track how I'm doing in terms of engagement. So if this engagement rate is going up, then that is maybe the time to put something out about your books, or maybe even something indirect about your books. It hasn't got to be just buy my book. It can be, the origins of your book. It can be the inspirations of your book. It can be about a character from your book. Something not directly buy my book, just subtle. And I look at this graphic to basically determine what to tweet next. It could be a question. It could be, hey, everybody, share your book, but sell it to me in 3 words. Remember that's one of the 5 elements there is incentive, and you're giving someone a reason to come and talk to you. So if you can keep that engagement number up, and then when it does rise, it's time to think about plugging your work. Now, not every day. I mean, I do it every day now because I've got a larger following, but I never used to. I used to go for days without even plugging my books. And so another method, which is largely unknown, or I don't think people accept it, but then again, Twitter keep you in the dark. I've mentioned this before. They don't share everything. They don't let you know certain details. And this method is not to share any links at all in your main tweet, but to instead put the link in a reply if you have to put one. Now, if your books are linked to a pinned tweet or even in the profile below your bio, now if your books are linked to a pinned tweet or even in the link in your profile, then in theory you won't really need to share many links. But why? Well, this is just a theory, but it's something I've kind of got nearer to understanding, is that Twitter likes to keep us on Twitter. They don't like external links. So not sharing links means that they can't do anything to keep control of you, because you have to imagine Twitter as a possessive being that wants you and all of its users online all the time, addicted, and to stay on Twitter. Links tend to take people away from that possessive being. So not putting that link in the first place will mean that Twitter can't really reduce your visibility, because I'm pretty sure it reduces visibility on certain links. You can always put it in the reply below. That's what I do to get around that. And using this method, the last 4 months, my Hall of Information blog has had nearly 3,000 clicks straight from Twitter, all because I use this method. Now, visual will normally always be superior to any kind of text on Twitter when it comes to selling something, and that includes books. People do judge books by their covers, and so if you have a professionally designed cover, Sharing it every so often will help keep followers aware of your work. I've created my own book banners, which just give my book covers that extra visual edge. You can find plenty of license-free artwork. You can even create your own, take a picture of something out in the real world if you're inclined to go outside, and put your books on that. That extra visual edge is what sometimes sells books. And because I have several books published, I have variety in what I can tweet about them, and variety is key. In the past, as I just said, I would go days without mentioning my books, and they still sold quite well even then because I had the basic visual elements and the basic profile and pinned tweet, so I could use variety along with that to sell. So talking of variety, it comes in many forms. So here's a list of ideas that I use to help sell my books on Twitter. Sharing a recent or older review, sharing an excerpt or a screenshot of a page from your book, sharing a selfie of your book, creating a simple teaser trailer, simply talking about your book's inspirations in a several tweet thread, sharing your recent sales statistics, both good and bad, and sharing a powerful quote from the blurb. Now, these ideas are probably about a week's worth of Twitter content if you spread them out over 7 days. Over that time, you should be able to figure out what time works well and which one of these works well at a certain time. Now, those who do spend time on the author side of Twitter will see the deluge of writers' lifts, shameless self-promo posts, all these other various lifts that are pretty much a daily occurrence. They do tend to clog up the feed quite a bit, but they do have some use. My tip will be to, every so often, share your work on these posts if you see one, and every now and then it's okay to run your own self-promo post. I do these sometimes, and even include my own works in the replies, just for that extra visible edge. And again, this kind of thing does tend to heat up in terms of notifications and engagement. It might become overwhelming for some, so take that as a caution. You can just turn off notifications to answer replies in your own time, and the potential reach on Twitter for a published author to find their next reader is huge. One day at a time is how I handle my Twitter journey, and staying present whilst also trying my best to be conversational. Remember the 5 elements, because they will serve you well, and they will eventually lead others to you, and they might just decide to buy your work as long as it's easily findable. So remember, as long as your tweets inspire, inform, entertain, give value, and of course provide incentive, that potential is indeed another subject for another time, as the next session will lay out how I realized the potential of Twitter, from initially unlocking that potential in my own mind to gaining thousands of followers, blog viewers, book sales, and reviews. There were many years which I spent on Twitter in a kind of purgatory of just sharing a random remark and sharing the odd link, and I didn't get very far. But then I realized the potential. For some further reading on selling books on social media, you'll find plenty of free-to-read guides over on my Hall of Information blog, leehallwriter.com. And of course, for a more concise experience, then do check out my guidebook, Consistent Creative Content, which is available now on Amazon. Until next time, peace out, rock and roll, man.